Welcome to The Thriving Mama, the podcast that teaches you not just how to survive, but to thrive in motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davis. So a topic that is near and dear to my heart is burnout, because it's so real for so many moms, both those who stay at home and those who work outside of the home. But it can be especially difficult for moms who are in healing professions. Every time I'm at a conference or an event, I hear these moms talking about how burnt out and exhausted they are from work and that they have nothing in the tank to give their families or themselves when they get home, and everyone ends up suffering. Many of them talk about leaving their profession because of this. And I feel like I can absolutely relate to it for a couple of reasons. First, before I had the tools that I have now, I would be so exhausted after seeing patients, and then I'd have to go take care of my newborn son. And I struggled so much. I really did. I struggled so much, and I felt depleted, and I felt like I had nothing left to give. And then I learned some tools, and that really, really helped me. I will also say my practice, I've done different reiterations and relaunchings of my practice to overcome the burnout and revive the joy that I find in helping others, heal and find vibrant health and vibrant lives. So, this topic is commonly discussed among practitioners, but it's usually not spoken about in public. So I really feel that it needs to come to the forefront so we can support these amazing women in all walks of, healthcare and healing professions. Today, I'll be talking about this topic with my friend, Dr. Joni Francisco, and we'll be covering signs that burnout is looming, how subconscious beliefs are the driver behind the healer, and some strategies for healers to use to maintain their energy and show up as their best self in every aspect of their lives. It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Joni Francisco. She's the owner of Flow with Dr. Joni. She helps clients translate the messages their body is sending them so that they can truly find the root cause and heal. Her signature Flow Method program is carefully curated to teach the helpers and healers how to move the energy blocks and drains from their body and their business so they can show up feeling great consistently for their clients, families, and life, all while building abundance and flow. She enjoys living at the beautiful Priest Lake, where she sees clients in person at her Priest Lake and Sandpoint offices in Idaho. She also loves being able to connect and help people across the nation with her virtual programming. She is building a community of connected helpers and healers wanting to find more abundance and flow in their lives and businesses at the Abundance and Flow community on the school platform. And the link to that will be in the show notes. I've launched this podcast to share my knowledge and experience, but I know that real change comes from action and not just information. For personalized guidance, I'm offering podcast listeners a free 20-minute Thriving Mama Glow assessment call. We'll evaluate your situation, and even if I'm not the best fit for you, I'll provide useful resources and support to help you on your journey. You'll find that link in the show notes as well. Hi, everyone. And I'm super excited to have my friend Joni here today. It's Dr. Joni Francisco. And she and I met through a coaching program, and we became friends through that. And, our backgrounds track a lot together, and we have a lot of similarities in our journey. And one thing that I love that she's doing is she specifically is working with helpers and healers. And I love that because so often helpers and healers give so much of themselves, often to the detriment of themselves. And it's a very, in my opinion, underserved area. So I'm super excited to have Joni here today. And thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I'm excited to be on here with you too.
Thank you.
It's always a good day when we get to jam on our topics.
Yes, exactly. So first, like I said before, moms are very similar to healers, in the fact that we often start out on our journey, because it was, a job that we thought we wanted. and it turns into something so much more. And, that journey evolves as we grow and we heal ourselves. And I know, like I said, a lot of moms can relate to that, but I would love for you to share your story on how you first started off in PT to where you are now, because I know we've touched on this in conversations that we've had. On a lot of times we are seeking tools to help ourselves grow and help heal ourselves. And that's kind of where that's kind of what dictates what happens on our journey, not just in practice, but also in life.
Yeah, for sure. And like many of us, we're these experiential leaders, right? So my both professional and my personal life really took the journey together. And so it's been quite the ride sometimes. And it's always interesting to see what the next thing that's going to come up that I'm going to be able to help people with later. So it's all fun to go through it first. My journey really, as a physical therapist, I really came from a background of Western medicine, right? I wasn't really exposed to anything else really in my life. And so as I dived into being a physical therapist, I just couldn't help but in my head be like, there has to be something better, right? I'd have these clients be sitting out in the waiting room and I go get them and they've been in chronic pain for years and they're drinking a Mountain Dew and eating Doritos for breakfast, right?
Yep.
And you're like, okay, well, this isn't right. And at that point, I was raised on a farm, so we had lots of fresh vegetables and my parents always hunted. So we had, I just didn't realize that we didn't have Mountain Dew and Doritos wasn't part of it, but we weren't talked about as eating healthy, right?
Yeah.
But part of me knew, like, the closer to nature, the better the food, right? Like I just knew that. And then this is where I started to get a little sticky in the Western medicine because I would have my clients or my patients and I would just recommend, I was like, hey, next time you get your labs drawn, why don't you ask your doctor if they'll check vitamin D or magnesium, right? You've been in chronic pain for years and nobody's ever looked at those things. And that's about all I knew about it then is those were the things I knew that they could check and most people could benefit from knowing those numbers, right? Especially we live in this latitude that it's gray like 8 months out of the year, I feel like. So those are, two things. And then I would get the physicians calling me and be like, hey, Joni, why are you telling my patients what labs to get, And so I was like, oh, well, first of all, hey, why haven't you done it? Second of all, I'm like, okay, for me to, I have a doctorate in physical therapy, right? And that still wasn't like putting me on par to make any of those decisions. And I don't know if you know this, but I really wanted to go back to school to be a naturopath. And my husband was like, nope, like you already spent 10 years in school. We live in a place that's like not even, like it doesn't even make sense. We would have to move, like, because at that time it was like, there wasn't all online stuff. And I'm kind of dating myself with that, but that's the way it was. And so I started looking around what else I could do, right? And what I landed on was becoming a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. And that really taught me about how food and supplements can heal the body, right? And I was like, it's such a better concept is if we can heal and give ourselves the foundations we need to heal, then we can move through the pain. Around that same time, I wasn't doing a great job of taking care of myself as a mom. I had a couple things going on there. I had been working as an aquatic therapist, so I was in the chlorine, sometimes like 9 hours a day. I didn't know. I loved being in warm water. I love water, but I didn't know that it was building up in my body. And then I had then I had a baby shortly after that. And these are all just decisions I made, right? There's no I don't have like a victim in this space, but just to share the clarity of the story, I was driving an hour and 15, hour and a half to work a 10-hour a day, drive that same home. And that continued even when I had my second child. And so my days were just crazy long. And there wasn't anybody really there wasn't someone making dinner. So then you get home at 7, you've been doing this, and then you have to make dinner, right? And laundry and all this stuff. And then my weekends were spent just like playing catch up and sleeping and resting and, nursing. And that was really one of my really low points. I remember just laying on the couch, nursing my daughter. Like I hadn't even showered for days, probably. And, throwing organic fruit snacks at my son because he's hungry. And I know that it was important to give him good food, but I also I couldn't even get off the couch. And that was like really my lowest of lows. And when I I'd already had a few other things in my health that had came up and I'd sought alternative providers. But at that point, I was like, I have got to fix myself from the inside out. And I have to make a lot of different choices. So I found a functional medicine doctor. I found a naturopath, like some people that could really help me heal. But the crux of it is really came from a midwife too in my face, even as I was pregnant. And she was just like, you don't have to live life like this, right? Like you don't have to do it and you shouldn't. And so that made me rethink that. And then I did able to like walk myself through the step. I didn't have somebody really leading me, overarching me, a coach or anyone like really monitoring the whole journey. I was really just still trying to do it all myself. And I got through it and I'm much, healthier and happier and have lots of tools now so that I can move through things as they come up. As I started to heal, I was drawn back into, as a physical therapist, I was starting my own clinic and I really wanted to look at doing myofascial release. I went on a personal vacation. I went to John Barnes Institute in Sedona and had myofascial release done there. And I was like, whoa, what just happened to me? Because I didn't know all the emotions and all of the things that I was storing in my body. And with myofascial release, it allows those to come up in a space that's completely different than you had ever thought of before. At least than I had ever thought of before, I should say. And there was a little time there. Like after that, as soon as I got home, I booked all my continuing ed for the next 2 years was myofascial release, right? Like I was into it. It was so amazing to me. And it game changer for my clients. And I then could see things in their body, experiences, emotions. And I would ask them, like, did you fall off a horse when you were small? And they'd be like, no. And 20 minutes later, we would be working and they'd start crying. And then they would be like, how'd you know that happened to me? I couldn't even remember. And I was like, I don't know. And so there was a period of time there that I really thought I was like, maybe losing it a little bit, or like I have a pineal gland tumor. Like I wasn't really sure what was happening. And then that's when I say Reiki found me, right? And it really opened up my eyes again to this whole other world that was available to me, but also helped me understand what was happening in the body, but also how we can release it and what was happening in me as a practitioner. And that was the healing thing that I really needed, right? I really needed to work on my emotions. I needed to work on my experiences. I needed to work on my beliefs. And that is what turned the corner for me in my personal health. But also then I was like, I can't keep doing work the way I've been doing it because it needs to be done in a different way. And so I was able to then provide this holistic care for people, which it is a game changer in healing. As you know, you do the same and we're able to actually heal instead of put Band-Aids all over things.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And you brought up a really good point about the tools and having all of the tools. And I think one of the beautiful things about having a wide toolbox is that you've got more capacity to meet people where they're at. Because I know a lot of times, especially like really burnt out, healers and moms, lots of times they've got like that program that they don't deserve it, right? To heal. So it's like they want to put like their baby toe in the water first. So it's like having like, you can help them with, like you said, the myofascial release or the Reiki, or if they just want nutrition at that moment, they could have that too. So it's great. I think it's an amazing thing that like you have that wide toolbox available. And that's like I said before we were talking, before we hopped on, is like, it's so nice to be able to offer so many different things to people so that you can meet them where they're at, but then you can guide them on the journey and like show them that there is more and you can do it in a fashion and in a time frame that works for them. So that's awesome. Have you seen that in your practice where like certain people might be a little resistant to certain things at first, and then the better they feel, the more open they become?
Yeah, I think that's true. And just the experience, right? Like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
The famous quote about like a fish doesn't know it's in water until it's out of the water, right?
Yeah.
So it just opens up a whole new world for them. But what I have noticed, and when you were talking about it, I'll just throw myself under the bus a little bit here, but there was a point in building my business that competition was like, I'd be like, oh, but they're doing this and they're doing that and they're doing this. And then once I had more tools and more availability, I was able to then look at a person from a place of not like scarcity on my side, right? But like what's best for that person. And then I really realized that people come to healing journeys in all different ways. And like you just said, and how they can buy in and believe. So like some go to a massage therapist and then the massage therapist talks to them about dry brushing. And then they're looking at the lymph, or they go to a nutritionist and the nutritionist's like, hey, you're stressed, like you're never going to heal your adrenals if you don't get some lifestyle stuff. And so they're able to go in and buy in where they can, or however divine, I think it's like divine intervention, like sends them where they send them first, And so that's what I see open up for people a lot is like somebody along the line can get in to start the journey. And then there's a lot of other help and support around to get them through the journey.
Exactly. And that's some interesting that you say that, because when you said you threw yourself under the bus, I can relate to that so much when I first started practicing. But then I quickly realized that I have kind of my zone of genius and my area of expertise, and there are a lot of other people who have the same. And so I would refer out a lot, and I still do to this day. When I do my discovery calls, like I always tell people, if I don't think I'm the best fit for them, I give them a suggestion on who I think would be. Because I think that's, an important piece of the puzzle too, is to kind of recognize what you're good at and recognize what other people are good at too. So let's kind of move on and we'll look at the fact that, moms in general tend to put themselves last. And over time that takes, such a toll, leaving her drained and uninspired and sometimes even unhappy. And moms who are healers often experience this even more because they're not only drained by, like family life and everything else, but also working with clients or patients. So I wanted you to elaborate on some of the signs that you see in either colleagues or people who you're working with that they might be in need of support or healing of their own.
Yeah, I would say one of the biggest themes I see across the board is this idea of fatigue, right? And people think they're tired, they need more sleep, but it is sometimes more sleep, but a lot of times it's a lot of the other things that are playing into that fatigue, and that's just how their body's manifesting it. So it definitely say fatigue. And then with that comes withdrawal, right? And I think then they're getting withdrawals from their activities, the withdrawals from their self-care, withdrawals from even work. And they're just that, I always phrase it as like, I need a vacation from my life. And I was like, well, wouldn't it be better to live a life you don't have to take a vacation from? I mean, it's always fun to go other places, but the people that are like, I just need a vacation from my life, like then they go on vacation, all they get to do is sleep, right? They don't get to do the fun stuff in that destination.
Right. Yeah. That's, I think really, really powerful, because that's, I would say, the number one thing across the board, regardless of like who the person is that I'm working with, almost exclusively, it's like energy. I don't have enough energy to get through the day, let alone like care for myself and then do all the other things I need to do. Most of them want to like get home and like hit the pillow. And like you said before, you can't do that. You have to feed your family and get your kids ready for school or, things of that nature. So yeah, energy is a big, big one.
Well, I just think, energy and that fatigue, it's kind of twofold, right? Because if we are tired, I think that's a permit, like we give ourselves permission to rest sometimes, but we do that in ways that aren't helping us actually do the one thing we need, which is the nervous system regulation, right? And instead we're binging TV that's adding to that nervous system dysregulation. We're listening to the news. We're doom scrolling on Facebook. So we're like, dopamine hit. Oh, we'll take it away. Okay, now you're tired again.
Yep.
And so that's a big game changer in my life. Is like one of my tools when I was really tired is to look where that's happening and see what else I could do during that time. It's like, oh, you're tired. Why don't you just go take a nap instead of watch TV? Oh, you're tired. Why don't you drink some water? Doing things like that, being intentional.
Yep. Yeah. Being intentional is a huge, huge piece of the puzzle as we have discussed. Yeah. And a lot of it is like you have also mentioned before, it's a choice. It's like making different choices. Like that one of my the patients and clients I work with, it's probably like a broken record quote to them. But I always say, like, every day you wake up and you have choices to make. And those choices either get you closer to health and closer to your goals, or they move you further away from them. And once you really kind of wrap your brain around that and take that into account, you see, like we've talked about before, the magic of intention and where those choices can lead you. They can lead you to, all of the places that you want to go, and you get kind of out of that, I always say the hamster wheel, the proverbial hamster wheel. You're moving a lot, but you're not moving forward.
Can I add just something about the choice?
Absolutely.
So one thing I see about choice is every time you make a choice in your favor, it gets easier and easier and easier, right? And every time you don't, the barrier gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and the less you want to do it, because it becomes like a big monster that you have to overcome instead of a simple step that you need to take.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. And that's really, really good way of looking at it, because it really does. It's almost like that snowball effect. Depending upon what direction you're going in, it just gets bigger and bigger, and the energy surrounding it gets bigger too. And once, if you're going in the opposite direction of where you want to go, it's even that much harder to, get started and overcome those hurdles. I know. I mean, I have definitely been there before. Like I've talked about with you before, like my whole like journey on, being really into fitness and working out and then stopping. And like, the interesting thing was my son saying to me, he's like, "Hey, Mom," he's like, he was old enough to know. He's like, "You start working out and you stop all the time." And this was like a pattern over years, like many years. And then I sat with that and I was like, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to set that example for my kids. I know that I need more movement in my life to be healthy, because I want to be around for my kids and my family and just life. And so I sat with that for a while. And that's when I made that intention intention and decision. I'm going to work out. My goal was 5 days a week, and I ended up being able to do that. But it seemed in the moment very insurmountable. And it was like all of that energy and all the stories we tell ourselves surrounding that type of stuff. It's so interesting how powerful that can be. And then when you just make that simple, like, decision and the switch your mindset, essentially, how much easier it becomes. So to piggyback on that idea of mindset, you and I both know that so often we're called to healing professions because of our own either trauma or subconscious beliefs. And I also feel like a lot of us, like when I was little, it was kind of programmed into me, like, the best professions are people like doctors and lawyers and, the things we hear from society. So I think a lot of that goes into where we end up going. But what are some of the subconscious beliefs or mindsets that you see in moms who are healers that are draining them, physically, mentally, emotionally, and how are these beliefs or traumas affecting their lives at home and work?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to unwind there. The first is just mentioning those types of professions. I think we get stuck in we need to do more. So when we're not feeling satisfied for whatever the other beliefs are behind it, I think we get stuck in that trap of, well, if I just do more, I'll either have more, be more satisfied. And that's a trap, right? Because it's not the way that we work as a healer, and it's not the way we work as women as far as being in our most powerful. We have to have both. We have to have that ebb and flow of do and be, but we can actually do our work from a place of being. And we are much more powerful in that place as women. Some may even say men are as well. That I really use this line, slow down to speed up, but it really just means like take time to be. So, and that allows things like you were talking a little bit about intention, but it allows for clarity and intention. And again, like the power, like I said, and it allows us to move in more flow, right? Instead of just like do. So I think that's probably one of the first things. And then the other, there's just the core beliefs that come up. And I would say they come across the board in different ways. I'm always surprised on a session where the rabbit hole goes. And I'm always like, are we going to get back to like what the intention was we set? And it always circles back. But there's some rabbit holes you go down, you're like, how does this even relate? But it's interesting how those beliefs, the littlest things that come up when we're little, like that 6 to 10-year-old, and how we interpret the situation. We don't have the tools to interpret the situation correctly. And all we can do is be like, okay, our parents, our caregivers are our God figure, and that's what I need to survive, right? And it's either them wrong or I'm wrong. Well, we can't make a God wrong. And so the I'm wrong happens a lot, or I'm not worthy of whatever, the interpretation. Like the parents might have been busy one day or 2 weekends in a row, and this kid was like really needed something during that time. And so they interpreted that as a belief that they weren't worthy of their parents' time, right? Which is totally like, it probably wasn't even like, it could have not even been at all true. It could have been 2 weekends in a row of their life, or it could have been those parents really needed to work hard because they love their kids so much to provide for them, right? But that's also a huge aha I have with a lot of people whose parents worked a lot, right? Like if we can go back in their little kidness and re-look at that event as far as like, oh, wow, I always interpreted it as they didn't love me enough because they were always gone. But in turn, then change that perspective and look at it from a place like they loved you so much. They sacrificed their precious minutes to be at work and away from you. And what's cool about belief change, I just have to say it because we're on this topic, but because then we can change that from then until now and the future, right? So we get to change the lens. They looked at the whole world, their whole life, and heal that stuff along the way and change the way those events felt to them and in their future and generations, really, right? Kind of digressing here a little bit. But yeah, so I would, it's safety, it's worthiness, it's love, it's being thrown out of the tribe, and it's belonging. Like those things across the board are what come up most of the time in some fashion, some way, because those are our primal needs for survival. And especially in the past when we lived more tribally and it wasn't safe to be alone.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, you brought up so many things, so many different things. And it's funny because I can relate to that too. Because I think for me, a lot of it was, I had touched on it before, was like that, the worthiness. And I can relate to that, like the busy parents and you feeling it's abandoned, right? You feel abandoned. And then you have to go, those are traumas that I had to work on myself too. And that's something that I see with, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the women I'm working with, we all have something like that, some kind of story. Sometimes it's more profound and sometimes I would say more deliberate, but a lot of us, and it kind of gets into that idea of trauma with, most of us, when we say the word trauma, we think big T trauma, we think like physical abuse, sexual abuse, we think emotional, like strong emotional abuse, but a lot of those little T traumas add up over time. And what I tend to see in practice is that those little T traumas, all of those where we thought our parents were ignoring us, but they were actually, like you said, they were working or trying to, provide or do something that in the end was a benefit to us, but our little 5-year-old self didn't interpret it that way. And so, it sets this kind of subconscious spiral in motion. And that ends up, like you said, being the lens for the rest of your life. And then when you can identify that and acknowledge that, it totally shifts things. And I feel it makes life easier to live. And you also gain so much more compassion for other people and what they've been through. And that's a choice. Like one of the big things that I work on with people is forgiveness. And when I say forgiveness, I'm like, forgiveness is for you. It's not for the other person. It's for you to heal and be able to move on. And it doesn't negate what happened to you or what you felt the version of events was, but it's really important for you to acknowledge that and feel that and move on, because then it emotionally sets you free. I always like try to use the like kind of the metaphor of the hot air balloon, and you're just releasing all of the sandbags so that you can float higher and freer and get to the best version of yourself. And yeah, I love all the stuff that you brought up, because that is really, really important stuff and stuff that I see in practice a lot.
And forgiveness is like having a practice of that will be life-changing for everybody, right? One thing I'm not sure everybody looks at forgiveness is I don't know if it's most of the time, But the most beneficial piece, or the piece that people miss the most, is really the idea of forgiving yourself for the way you reacted in the situation. And that's where I'm finding a lot of adults need the forgiveness practice piece, is because they think they have to forgive the other person. But the rub is the piece of them that was out of alignment with themselves, or the idea that they let that happen to them, which isn't even a true narrative, but it was a place where they let themselves give up their power. And that's the piece that by forgiving that, you're able to pull back in your power from that situation into you instead of the other person or the experience holding your power.
100%. That's something that I talk about a lot with the people I work with. And something like, it's like just kind of some quick tips. Two of the most powerful things I think you can do if you're doing nothing are having a gratitude practice, a simple gratitude practice, and a simple forgiveness practice. If you do those two things alone, that really can change and shift things for you. And like you said, I mean, we incorporate it into what we do. But, when I'm talking to people and they're like, well, what can I do? Like, what can I start to do right now so that I can start feeling better? Those are often two of my biggest tips, because those really can profoundly shift how, they shift your biochemistry in the instant that you start doing them. So they really are very, very powerful.
Yeah. And it's powerful to look at yourself in a way that, well, first that, compassion that you would give anyone else, but also just in a way that allows for, losing that, my word right there, but yeah. So the compassion for yourself. Yeah. It's important.
Yeah. So earlier we talked a little bit about kind of like stuckness and, not being able to move forward. So, with people in general, but I especially feel like this is in the healing realm. I'd say healers realm. I feel like we get to a place where, it's that stuckness. You're trying to do lots of things to get better. You're not moving forward. You're not really sticking to, you'll go from thing to thing to thing rather than like sticking to one thing. What advice do you have for people to get out of that kind of like energy vortex? That's the stuckness that's preventing them from moving forward.
Oof, that's a loaded question.
I know, right?
I think it does go back to deciding our choice, right? Like making the choice that you can move out of that and other things can be available to you. So I think making the decision and giving yourself permission to do it differently is super important to getting unstuck. I mean, obviously looking for help wherever you can, that's also can just be really helpful at the beginning of a healing journey. And just, to looking at the beliefs, to looking at the emotions, but also someone else to hold that loving space for you so that you can look with curiosity and without judgment on where you've been and where you're going. And it allows healing so much faster that way, if we can do it from a place of that curiosity, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's a huge point. The loving space and the place of curiosity is such a great place to come from, because we live in a judgmental society and we always try to attribute cause to everything. And that's just not the case. Things are the way they are. There truly is no cause and effect. They're really, it's not to get too philosophical, but things are just the way they are. You just be. And I think that's a huge piece of it. And we also forget that we're energetic beings. Our energy interacts with the energy of not just all of the other living beings around us, but also the universe. And we have the power to shift and transform that energy in very, very simple ways. And like we just said, gratitude, that changes your biochemistry. That when you change your biochemistry, or even breath work, taking a couple of deep breaths, that'll immediately change your biochemistry and change the vibrational energies that you're putting out to the world and what you're calling into yourself. So it's like, there are lots of ways I think we can get unstuck, from that, proverbial kind of vortex that we get, stuck in sometimes, and we're not moving forward, even though we're actually putting out a lot of energy.
Yeah. And then the other piece I would really think about is how you can create safety for yourself to get out of that loop, because as our subconscious, I don't know if this is an explicit podcast or not, but I always just say it's a sneaky little, a little guy.
Yeah, gotcha.
he, like it's really sneaky how it would love to keep you in that loop.
Yes.
Like, it would love to stay in the misery and then to go into the discomfort of the unknown.
Right.
And so
yes,
that's another piece that's really important for people to understand. Like, it's not your fault you're stuck in the loop.
right.
Your subconscious is keeping you there because it feels like that's your safest place.
Yep.
And so if you can get in a place that you feel safe, making a different choice, and that really is that nervous system regulation. And there's lots of techniques for that. Like you said, the breath work just changes it. Havening, walking actually really does because it uses both parts of the brain. It's really good nervous system.
Yes.
Calms it down. Yeah. But I would say that's mostly why we get stuck in the loop is because it feels unsafe to make a different choice.
Yeah. Our subconscious really likes our default operating, modes and mechanisms. It really likes to be at like what it considers the baseline. One of my mentors always says that our subconscious mind is the most powerful goal-achieving agency known to man. And it's true. Its primary job is to keep you alive. And in its context, keeping you alive is keeping you, whatever it considers your kind of baseline or your normal to be. It doesn't really want you to change. So you kind of have to fight against what's happening. And it's one of those things like when you're aware of it, it can change your life because you become more cognizant of all of the things that, like we talked about on your podcast, might not be your thoughts, the thoughts that might have been, planted in our brains from parents or other people that were influential upon us from ages 0 to 5, when our identities were developing. So it's really, really interesting stuff that happens. But it's like once you understand and once you're aware, it's like, you have the power to change it. And I think that in and of itself is huge.
Yeah. And one super interesting thing I find, I find all this so fascinating and I could just like jam
I know,
on
me
it
too.
all day, every day.
Talk about it all the time.
That our subconscious cannot refute information. And
Yep.
so I think that's really important to know because once we're stuck in that loop, with the judgment and shame comes often, right? The self-talk of, I'm so lazy, I just can't get off the couch. What's wrong with me? I can't start a new diet. What's wrong with me? I said I would call my friend today, like even simple tasks like that. And so then your subconscious starts saying, you're lazy. You don't connect with your friends. You don't know how to start a new program. And so that's where you were just, another quick tip of changing the vibration. But also just that's where affirmations come in, right? And sometimes I have to have people start with I am human, which is better than I am lazy, right?
Yes. Oh,
but
for sure.
Everybody I've talked to so far identifies as human. There may not be all humans out here, but everybody pretty much is can identify. And that's a very much more positive statement than I am lazy or, all the other things that come up in our self-talk. But some people have to start there. And then if you can start there, it changes the way your brain starts to think and opens up possibilities.
Yeah. I know we could probably talk about all this stuff for hours and hours and hours. We'll have to do it on another podcast, which would be awesome. But let's leave the audience with, I would love for you to share like a couple of tips about how you feel they can just easily implement to prevent like the burnout and the energy drain that sometimes happens when you're a healer.
Yeah, I think the number one priority is protecting your energy. As a healer and as a mom, it really is important that you put your oxygen mask on first, whether in either of those places or both of those places. And I feel in particular, healers can do that very intentionally with their transitions. I feel like it's super important to do the transition work. And what I mean by that is, after a client leaves, you're taking the time to take back all your energy that they may have absorbed, but you also then can lovingly wrap up all of their stuff and give it back to them so they can actually go heal from it. And then having that same thing when you're going in and out of roles, like you and I have, everybody has many hats, but now we're like doing podcasting. So now we have our podcast hat on. And so like intentionally I sit down before this, I put on my like few breaths of like, I'm going into podcast now. I'm not in practitioner mode, right? And I'm not in mom mode. And then I do that in between clients as well. And it is game changer for me to keep my power and all of my own stuff separate from other people's. And then I do that again before I go, back into my house in the evenings if I'm out, or I try to do something at my desk if I'm already home. My kids make fun of me for sitting in my car for that transition time sometimes, but I do that. But also just getting your foundations, right? Like that is another thing. Like you're so busy giving throughout the whole day that you have to make a priority and intentionally get your water, get your good food, get your supplements, get your movement, get your connection time to source, however you think, source, universe, God. But it is super important that we have that for our spirit to not be depleted.
Yeah, I think those are all like beautiful and perfect tips, because I feel like when I have all of those things, when I do all of those things and I'm intentional, I'm a much better version of myself. I'm a better practitioner. I'm a better mom. I'm a better wife, all of those things, than when I kind of don't do that stuff and just kind of let the world happen to me. And I'm very aware and mindful of that. And that I feel like for me, especially because like our world is a little bit different, we're virtual, and well, you see people in person too, but for me, I'm like all virtual. So like I literally, like every time I switch from person to person, I try to clear out the space. When I sit down, I clear out the space. When I'm done, I clear the space. Like you said, I do all of that work. And then sometimes I find like I'll be seeing people back to back to back, and then I forget to eat. And then my blood sugar is all over the place, So it's like, you really do have to like be intentional about that. Like I often like here, I've got like my big jar of water, and I've got tea, and I've got some food next to me, just because I don't want to let that happen. So those are perfect tips, because I think it's the little things. It's little simple things that add up over time if we're not taking care of them.
I think that's the key there is, and again, it's in that snowball effect, right? Where you start to let one thing slide, and then you let a couple more things slide, and then you just find yourself in a place you can't get out of. And so, yeah, it's very important.
Absolutely. And I think there's so many people out there, healers, and just people in general, moms in general can relate to all of that too. Well, thank you so much, Joni, for coming on today. And this was an awesome discussion. And I think that there are some things that we could touch on, again in the future, because this is a conversation that I think isn't like, it's not a conversation really that ends. It's something that we need to keep on discussing, because, A, we need to get that message out to the world, but B, it's like, if you forget about it, that's when trouble starts brewing. So awesome. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm looking forward to the next time. Maybe we can dive into that subconscious realm more.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to do that. And I would also just like to offer up for your listeners too. I have a community in school, and it's called the Abundance and Flow Community. And there's free tools in there. So if you don't know what it means like to protect your energy, I have a few really good free trainings in there that they can, and that's for healers and helpers, the community is, but any mom, anybody that feels like their energy is drained can go in there, and there's some free tools to help them with those transitions in there. So I would love to.
Awesome. Is there any place else that they can find you, or do you just want to go to the school community?
Yeah, I think going to the school community is the best place for everybody to find the information that they need.
Perfect. Thanks.
I do have also a podcast. It's called Creating Flow. So there is information there too, but that's just, as you know, getting started. So
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. And I look forward to the next time we get to talk.
Yeah. Thank you. You too.
If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness, and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.